The poem is from Whistling Past the Tavern, the book of poetry that Jeff and I did a couple of years ago. And the title of this one is Pulling at a Thread. I noticed the thread on the button of the shirt and pulled. And when the button fell off, there was a moment's irritation until the thought occurred to me, the possibility that this unraveling could simply continue up the sleeve, across the shoulders, down the torso and the other arm all at once, and then, by some odd attraction unknown to science, progress from the shirt tail to the shorts and trousers and socks, and then, inexplicably jumping like lightning from earth to sky, the mystery would continue from the tips of the toes all the way up the body, till nothing remained to my wife's astonished gaze but a slappy, happy Cheshire grin. Then, side to side, that too would go, not fading cat-like, but a clean unwinding. And then another lightning leap to mind, and all the dark and hidden residue floating up and up like buried stuff from deep swamp muck stirred by wind coming to light and lining up bit by bit like the loopy threads on a dog food sack. And if you can find just the right place to start, they unzip thread by binding thread quickly and easily, just like that, until nothing is left but you, beloved.
That's the effacement, folks. Very good. I love this. Bob is very wacky.
Thank you, Jeff.
I thought of as many of you as I could remember in the lagoon cabin last night. I just about everybody that I see, you know, so Baba, come and be with us. Hey, so shall we have a moment of silence?
Yes, let's do that.
It's pretty close to time. Jai Baba, everybody.
Thanks to Angela for posting on the circle the pictures of the Dooney lighting for today, April 12th. It was a treat. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Desires. More than anything else, our veils result from our attraction to objects and sensations at exterior and interior levels that captivate and preoccupy our consciousness. Such preoccupation amounts to a wasting of our lifetime. Mayor Baba says that in our state of ignorance, we are, quote, continually in the grip of wanting. Wanting becomes a habit, and we look for reasons to keep it functioning. Our ego is made up of fat strands of desires, consisting of psychic tentacles continuously reaching out for things, and it is reluctant to give up its life. It is very clever at deceiving our minds in order to retain its existence, and even at finding ways to expand its scope. We are like the lean, hungry rabbit who comes upon a farmer's fenced-in garden. After he finds a way to squeeze under the fence, the rabbit eats and enjoys. Then he decides to head for home, but he cannot get back under the fence because he is too fat. We fatten ourselves in the Garden of Eden, the illusory creation, and then one day wake up to the fact that we're captives. We begin to long for freedom. We realize that we have to cease going after everything that comes along. We see that we must slim down by getting rid of these samskaric veils, our desires and attachments at the gross level. Fundamentally, desires are a repudiation of our innate completeness, not a separate completeness, but completeness within the aura of the Master's divine love and grace. The wanting machine is the only thing keeping us from our completeness. We discover that when we make an effort and manage to stop the wanting machine, even for a short time, we can experience our inherent completeness to some degree.
Any comments there from anybody? That stir up any of the want machine?
I just had the thought, we need to jump into Baba's washing machine.
Yeah, no, it's, but Darwin was very, very focused on self-acceptance and feeling completeness rather than self-improvement, which is endless.
Well, can I just say that it seems like Baba's doing a lot for us with this whole social distancing, and a lot of the things that we think we need, we're not getting right now, or it's like a big deal even just to go out and get food shopping or whatever. So I think he's changing the whole game plan here real quick and
Yeah.
pretty profoundly.
Yeah. Maybe
So
the
if we
whole
can't do it, if we can't cut out, wanting all these things and going and getting them ourselves, he's doing a job on us right now.
Yeah.
Jim Oppenheim had his hand up.
Yeah, I'm lost for words. It's like a salve, the way that Darwin describing, because I think of the consistent what Jeff was saying of, always trying to self-improve, which implies that if you need to improve, then you're not complete. And then you start this whole dichotomy of, not good enough, et cetera. And it's just another blind alley. And here Darwin's talking about it's already complete. It just feels really, really healing to hear that, to get away from that whole dichotomy of thought where you're constantly kicking yourself for not being complete,
Yeah. No, that's a deep meaning to that.
Abby, go ahead.
I was wondering, Jeff, if you could say more about, because I've always practiced self-improvement and not much self-acceptance, thinking that I'm going somewhere. Can you share more about that self-acceptance and why he emphasized that? Because it would seem that, I guess there's really nothing you can do about it. It's unfolding as it needs to. But can you say more about that?
Yeah, I guess I would have to say there's kind of self-improvement, which is in the service of drawing closer to Baba. And then there's kind of worldly self-improvement where you're improving your situation in the world. But say if you have blocks between you and Baba and it doesn't feel right, you can work on those things and improve, kind of sublimate those emotions that kind of keep you at a distance from Baba. So in a way, you're involved in a type of self-improvement, but it's a different type where you're trying to kind of remove the veils so that you can get closer to your inherent completeness. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyone else wants to follow up with that?
I guess I was hearing it more as not even trying to improve yourself or your connection with Baba, but as opposed to his other instructions to simply surrender and give the flaws and give the difficulties to him, and simply surrender and show the love.
Yeah, no, that's a kind of that's the improvement, self-improvement in the, I mean, that giving to Baba is an effort, and it's, I guess you could say that's not self-improvement, but in a way it is. But I know what you mean. Yeah, if you can, the more you can give it directly to Baba and let him take over, the better. I mean, that's the shortcut. But then there's us and our little frailties and hang-ups, and we, you know, we kind of get involved in there to try to get free of them.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of effort. And then there's the kind of, like you say, just giving it to Baba. Darwin used to say, eventually you get into a state of constant giving. Whatever comes into you goes directly to Baba. You don't look at it, you know, you just keep giving it to Baba until you're kind of surrendered. But that is, you know, that's a PhD level. We're working gradually toward that.
Sort of
So that
like
we
junk
can-
mail.
Yeah, everything becomes junk mail after a while. Except love. Yeah.
Daniel Stone,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the critique of self-improvement here feels like it's painting with a pretty broad brush. And I was, in this conversation, I was just thinking about, like, so what does that really mean? Like, what are examples of self-improvement that I can think of? And do I really think they're contrary to Baba? So for example, I think about people that are trying to learn things like nonviolent communication, which would definitely be in the realm of a self-improvement kind of effort,
Yeah.
which I think is like a really functional, useful, you know, positive thing to do. And it's a way of relating more effectively and more, you know, really in a more loving way in the world. And I think that's really, I'd be careful about just sort of saying, well, self-improvement's out the window and it's all about self-acceptance. I think with Baba, it's always a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
I think whatever efforts we make at self-improvement, we need to be careful. I think, at least I need to be careful not to somehow in the process be feeding myself interior messages of I'm not enough in the process. I mean, I think that's an important kind of inner dialogue that sort of gets in the way of, you know, of self-acceptance. But I think always with Baba, it's these two things. It's like effort and grace. It's like make the effort, it's at improvement, but always come back to sort of, you know, letting, you know, feeling connected to Baba and trying to find completeness with Baba. So I guess I'm not comfortable with the duality, you know, making a duality up.
Yeah. No, it is a mix of various methods, for sure, I would say.
So I was just thinking about what you said, Jeff, when you said that Darwin would say, and of course, across the world, I mean, everywhere, there's, you know, give it to God, just give it to God. And in this whole context of, you know, when Darwin's saying, we discover that when we make an effort and manage to stop the wanting machine, even for a short time, we can experience our inherent completeness to some degree. Well, I just find it very fascinating because each of us like find our own way to that experience, or that, you know, someone said, what does that actually mean? What does it actually mean to give something to Baba? What does that look like? Because it's an inner work. And I think it's individually, it has to be intuitive. It has to be just what inside of yourself, when you connect with Baba, you find that way that you do that with Baba. and somebody might have their method, and it's not even, it might not work for you. So I just find it fascinating that each of us has to find that on our own. Like, what does it really mean to give everything to Baba? Like, even the tiniest thought, or the tiny, just like, how do we really fall to his feet and give it all, give our whole lives to him, really? I mean, what does that mean? What does that really mean? I mean, come on. I mean, we hear the words again and again, but I pose the question to each of us, like, how do you do that? How do you give your everything to Baba, or your troubles, or whatever it is? Because I think that's what, for me, that's what Darwin's saying. And I've seen videos of him where I'm like, that guy is moment to moment, like, as he's speaking, I can see when people do that. It's like, there's a function that they're doing inwardly that I'm like, oh, I recognize that, but I don't know what it's like for everybody else. It's, I don't know if I make sense, but I'm trying to get that out of my head. Yeah. Anyways, J. Bob.
Yeah, no, we could spend the rest of the session talking about how each of us gives our way of giving to Baba, surrendering our life. And it may come up in the process as we go along, but it would be nice just to see how each one of you does this, because it's one of the real work that's going on,
Gail, you had your hand up.
Yeah, the last two sentences, what Alan was referencing, the wanting machine is the only thing keeping us from our completeness. We discover that when we make an effort and manage to stop the wanting machine, even for a short time, we can experience our inherent completeness to some degree. What I've come to find about Baba is it's not inscrutable. It's not something that we can't understand. And I'm not saying it's easy to remember to give it all, because that's hard to do. But it's very reassuring to me. I have studied this some when I was in India and other times just myself, but it really is resonating that I am complete and I don't have to get to XYZ that is in my mind. It's on my list of where I need to be. I'm complete now, and it's just the wantingness, the wanting machine. I'm excited about this. It's just seeing the words inherent completeness means that Baba has given me, and in turn all of us, an inherent completeness. And that's something I didn't know before. So I'm glad to be finding that out now. Thanks.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well said.
Steve and Denny, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just commenting on a lot of our spirituality today in our culture. Even life coaching has become popular, like Tony Robbins and the law of attraction. And a lot of that paradigm is, they use spiritual principles to elevate their life, to increase, what do you want? What do you want to manifest? I've read Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, which is using some of the same metaphysics. It's spiritual, but it's a lot of business people use it to set goals. And I think of Tony Robbins as a good epitome of that, And I asked a friend of mine regarding some Baba lovers will say they don't agree with Darwin Shaw's perspective, that they still love the world. They love the fact that they want to be an entrepreneur or go out there and play the game. They love it, and they don't see it that way. And it's honest. But I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said that a person like Tony Robbins, who I believe is spiritual, he's using spiritual about being happy in life, self-actualization, that's his karma. He has to go through that, other people like him, to exhaust that in order to probably another lifetime to be a monk in a monastery, to go, I'm sick of this world. It's not, because in my perspective as a Baba lover, I just want Baba. I've mentioned this to Denny, and we were talking about this. what Christ said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That's the first thing. But because I think that whatever I get, if it's a material object, even a job, or it's temporary, and it's just going to last to happen. It's like a new car for a while. And so I just wanted to mention that maybe Jeff's perspectives, and my friend mentioned that the people, like Evident Grace is written for a demographic of Baba lovers, maybe karmically, that are ready to invoke this. I'm sick of the word, generally speaking, if your karma is, I've been through enough lifetimes, I know the material, the self-improvement, that whole system, what do you want out of life is not lasting. It doesn't make me happy. If that's just the karma, some people may not karmically be ready for a book like Evident Grace. They may be Baba lovers, but it may not resonate with them. I just wanted maybe Jeff's perspective on that.
It's interesting because some of the Baba's old mandali, I guess I don't want to mention that they weren't into the Effort and Grace book, but they were completely devoted to Baba and turning out books and giving talks about Baba, and it didn't ring a bell with them. Their outer life was a reflection of their inner life. They weren't moving from the outer life to the inner life. Their outer life became kind of a true expression of their inner life. That's another way to go. And there are a lot of people who approach Baba that way, and it's quite beautiful. And these are like long time Baba followers. So it is possible. This is a particular thing where you want to become aware of your inner relationship with Baba. This is bringing a spotlight into the interior, but that's not necessarily for everyone. And it doesn't mean that you're ahead of of everybody else. It's just a particular way. That's.
Thank you.
Yeah. Patty Curtis, go ahead.
Everybody keeps saying new things and my mind gets directed in another area, but I'm just being reminded because this poem came out via somebody on the internet just recently in relationship to what Baba had asked his mandali to say. The poem to repeat, and Erich was having a dialogue with, I guess, Dan Ladinsky in this case, and had written it out for Dan. And it just, hearing all of this and seeing whether it's the thought train or the wanting machine, whatever it is, I'll just read this. And I know you all know it, but it would be nice to reflect on that in the context of what we're saying. I am not the body. This is what Baba dictated for his Erich to say and for other mandali, and I don't know which ones. I am not the body. I am not the mind. I am not this. I am not that. I am nothing but a living lie of the truth that is me. And unless the lie is dead, the truth cannot be. And there's a little parentheses, be known, which is what I think was written to Dan Ladinsky. Dan said probably because of the English translation. But in this context, for me, when I read that, I've actually taken on to answer I don't remember who the young man was who was saying, how is this affecting people? What is their way to give it up? I repeat things that it's not me. That's one way in which I realize I am the reflection. I'm a personality. I'm a drop soul. Baba created the drop soul. But I'm the Baba in here somewhere. I'm that source that wants to emanate through. So if I keep telling my mind that I'm not this body, that maybe the source can work more freely and I can have that union, I can have that experience that we long for as we call union with the divine. Jai
Beautiful. Yeah. Very nice, Patty. Yeah, it's like a hand puppet that says there's no such thing as a hidden hand behind all of this.
Reminded of the story of Don Stevens, talking about how our karma's different. And Don, was working in the oil industry, and then he got to feel that he was living too worldly a life and thought he should be doing something like social work, if I'm remembering right. But he didn't tell Baba, and Baba finally drew it out of him. This is what I'm thinking. And Baba said, "Who do you think put you in the oil industry? You stay right where you are. You're doing my work."
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Eugene, you've got your hand up.
Yes. I think it has like has to do with a point of view of it's like yoga and Tai Chi. If you're doing it to like glorify yourself, kind of, it's it's like an eternal striving then. But if you just do it for enjoyment and fun, and you still derive benefit from it, but it doesn't have that that aspect of the future, or dissatisfaction with where you are now, Jai Baba.
Yeah, thank you, Eugene.
Here goes. Limitations. One time in 1954, when 18 of us Western men were gathered in a big room in the retreat building in Mehrabad as Baba's guest for 3 weeks, Baba said, "When we go outside this room, we see hills, etc. Why? Because we have projected it out of us. It is all we. Being in God, we are the sole producers of all phenomena, and we get entangled in that. It is very difficult to come out of that entanglement. This means that we make veils by taking as real those conditions that we ourselves have created in the first place. We impose restrictions on our own consciousness. Through complacency, we tend to accept spiritual limitations without being conscious that we are doing so. We think in terms of separation, multiplicity, and eventuality. Spiritual limitations include being bound by time, which Baba has said in The Invention of Maya, illusion. Our sense of time needs to undergo a change. We have allowed it to condition our thinking. We must repudiate the future. For example, Baba tells us how many lifetimes it takes before we reach the goal of God realization or liberation. Many people feel discouraged and think it will be ages before they reach the goal. However, I take the attitude that most of those lifetimes are behind us. Spiritual limitations are deeply ingrained within our consciousness. We are comfortable with them, and to be unlimited seems strange to us. But we can easily experience great spiritual freedom and salvation by accepting the immediacy of the Master's love and grace. To do this, however, we have to stop limiting God. Sometimes we judge his omnipotence and imagine him to be lacking. We affirm that he is omnipotent and that he can do anything, but we feel and act to the contrary. We may also discover that we are placing limits upon the Master. We have a tendency to unconsciously form beliefs that keep us bound to limitations and actually prevent us from drawing closer to the Master, to Baba. Thinking that we must purify ourselves before surrendering to him is an example of a limitation based on the misconception that his love for us is conditioned by our so-called goodness or worthiness. By thinking this, we are limiting the possibility of experiencing his unlimited, unconditional love. Or we may think of Baba as the past and believe that closeness to him is no longer possible. This misconception is the result of thinking of him as his physical body. In fact, Baba is of the present and is more accessible than ever. Harboring spiritual limitations has the effect of limiting within our minds and hearts the scope of our possibilities. Baba says that what we have to do is reverse the process of creation and perception without obliterating consciousness. Becoming aware that we are the ones programming our limitations is one aspect of the conquering of the unconsciousness that Baba refers to.
Wow. I remember Darwin used to describe the scene up there in Upper Maribod, and I never could quite reverse the process of creation. I've always had a hard time wrapping my mind around it. If anybody can elucidate that, I would appreciate it.
From the last chapter and this one, especially that very last line, conquering the unconscious that Baba refers to. You know, and to Alan earlier, how do you give to Baba? Well, it seems to me like when I was reading Bao, the infinite consciousness is examined through the prism of creation unconsciously.
Wait, say that again, Paul.
The infinite consciousness of God, right, is examined through the prism of creation unconsciously. And to conquer that consciousness is basically, we're not doing it. This is all happening, just like when Baba says his plan's gonna happen, it's bound to happen, no sense in worrying about it. So when you say, can I give something to Baba? The only thing, in my opinion, the only thing you can do is love Baba. I mean, everything else is his. This is, as it says earlier in this chapter, it's in God. Baba says it's in God, everything. So this is his pandemic. This is his reading right now of Effort and Grace. So what exactly is there really to give him when you think of it that way? But mastering the unconscious, right, in the human form, we think that we're doing it. So you see how Darwin is saying we place limitations on God, right? This is all our doing. So when we always say just get out of our own way, you know, it's the simplest things, right? Love God, let God. And so, you know, I just always come on top of that when I read that little thing that Baba refers to when he says conquering of the unconscious, right? So, and maybe it's one way to look at it. If you look at infinite consciousness as light, let's say, and you pass light through a prism, it breaks it up into all its components. That's what the light was made up of. So infinite consciousness is God through the prism of creation, breaks up all of infinite conscious unconsciously, and it's being examined. But it's being examined by God, not us. Just my thoughts.
Ooh. Whoa. Any clarification of what Paul said? No. Any other comments?
Adrienne, go ahead.
Hi. Paul kind of just cleared my brain out, so I'm not exactly sure what I was going to say, but there's something about, I noticed within myself, I'm just going to be vulnerable and share, that I can be very almost like acquisitive or like capitalist with my sort of obsession or fixation on, I think the phrase was like purifying my soul before I like come to Baba, you know, before I lay myself down for Baba. I feel like I have to prove myself to Baba. And it's such a painful cycle that definitely feels like my karma, and probably like the karma of a lot of people in this world. And I think a lot of Americans, because we are really brainwashed and inundated with this idea that comes from, you know, so many centuries from lots of cultures, that it is our work and our physical labor that sort of validates our worthiness in the world. And I just feel that 100% in my relationship with Baba. And it's something that he really has been schooling me on. And there's something that I've always really admired about Darwin, just being someone who, from my perspective, really had the knack for doing work from a place of like true devotion and love, and not for the acquisition of like whatever spiritual cleansings or something, you know, like I'm doing service, therefore I am good. You know, there's something that he's really teaching and showing about when you're sacrificing your ego, everything you do becomes like just Baba working through you in some way. So I kind of maybe a muddled statement, but I'm sort of curious about other people's experience with that, and also want to keep reading. So just, you know, that's what I have to say about that.
This was in response to Paul, and maybe to what we were reading earlier, I was just using, yes, Baba is everything, but he's the pandemic, he's everything. But when I'm getting into my mind of personality or self-improvement was the issue earlier on, you can only go so far, but as soon as I redirect and I'm directing it towards Baba, it's as if the walls open up and there's so much generosity in that space and a lot comes out of it. So for me, it's just it's a movement of my mind, but I slip into a space that feels finer and uncluttered. And it's not the Baba that I'm doing like, oh, this is what I'll do to please Baba, because I certainly have that, but that puts a limitation. But I do shift into a place that it has an infinite quality to it. And in that, the possibilities are limitless. Okay.
Beautiful. Yep. Lovely, Catherine.
Happy Easter, everybody.
Yeah.
Jai Baba. Janet Jacobs, go ahead.
Yeah, this is sort of in response to both Paul and, not in response, but my questioning that comes up from both Paul and Adrienne, and that is the title of this book, Effort and Grace. And so I think what Catherine was talking about in my interpretation is the grace that just comes in. And you know what I could be interpreting all this not correctly, but what I understood from Paul was like, it's all Baba's, this is his work. And so, I mean, and this isn't just my question right now, this is my question, you know, when I'm reading the book, which I have been for a while, but where our effort meets his grace and vice versa. So it's not really any answer. It's just questioning more and wanting how people connect to that thought.
I'll just quote a Sufi line of, I'm not, someone else may respond to what you said, but there's a Sufi line that goes, the truth we tell of cannot be found by seeking, yet only seekers find it. The truth that we tell of cannot be found by seeking, yet only seekers find it. And I interpret that we make this effort and Baba is touched by our effort, even though our effort won't accomplish what we hope. He takes compassion on us and he makes something that was impossible possible. It makes growth that we might be too dysfunctional to grow. He makes it possible. You follow?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thanks, Jeff. That just cleared away a fog for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Denny, is it, or Steve?
Yeah, it's Denny. And in this case, you know, I was thinking of how in the world I ever found out about Baba. But Jeff and I were dead set that Christ was alive this lifetime. And what did that mean? I expected to see Christ in the body, you know, looking like Jesus. And when I saw pictures of Baba, Jeff had shown me "Don't Worry, Be Happy" picture of Baba. I thought, could this really be it? It's not Baba. I mean, it's not Jesus. I got confused with the name at first. And it took me a while, it took me a long time of sitting around contemplating that, trying to figure it out. And finally, Darwin made it very clear one day. But that's another story. What then was I wanted to know, how do I find my Baba? How do I find, and it was through many conversations with many people. And there's a good example of it that I was fortunate to come into this place, and the picture of Baba with his hands praying. And I've gotten to come to be that when I wake up in the morning and I see that, I say, oh my gosh, there you are, Baba. You're just always praying. You're always loving me. You're always in contemplation of life. And it helps bring Baba into reality now. And I'll look back up to that picture and I'll smile and I'll put my hands together and say, good morning, Baba. Good morning, Baba. Or good night, Baba. And this is bringing that attention to me that you are present, Baba. You're always present, but sometimes you really show your face. And when you do, I get a glimpse of who you really are. You really are present. And that came to mind a little while ago that someone had commented about, how do we feel you? How do we know you? And it's a process. How much effort do we want to put into it? How much time are we willing to not reach deeper, but to just be satisfied? And I'm not satisfied. I want more of you, Baba. I remember wanting to, Darwin said something about, ooh, he smelled the fragrance of Baba. And we were walking down from the lagoon cabin, from the women's cabin there on the center towards the bridge. And all of a sudden, I smelt this aroma. And it was just, and I looked over to Darwin and he just smiled back at me. And it was very clear that I was smelling that fragrance of Baba and it didn't need a comment. And Darwin reaffirmed it just with a look and a smile, a very special smile. But it's not easy for me to attain the amount of time I want to spend with Baba. And it takes effort. And Jeff would get up to 5 o'clock in the morning and talk about sitting with Baba for 2 or 3 hours. And I was thinking, that's not my style. I would like to do that, but I never woke up in time to do that. So we have to find our own style, I guess. And when we get a flash of it, we'll hold on to it and do that more often. So I don't know if that's making any sense, but here's a picture of Baba over my head. And I have it in the house all the time, but I don't always look at it. I'm thinking of other things. Oh, I got to put in a garden. Oh, I've got to do this. Oh, I got to run on and see Angela and Cliff and see about, you know, this or that. How much time do I want to put into being with you, Baba? And it comes slowly, slowly. But it's more now than it used to be. And that's the truth. Anyway, thank you.
Yep. Amen.
Yes, Jai Baba. Abby, go ahead.
I just wondered if somebody could explain the passage. Baba said that what we have to do is reverse the process of creation and perception, and then in quotation marks, without obliterating consciousness. I really don't know what that means.
That's the thing that I just could, he used to say that and I could never quite get an experiential handle on that. I'm sure there's something that we do that's a reflection of that dynamic. But is there anybody that can explain that?
I'm not sure this is quite to that point, but this whole effort and just the title "Effort and Grace" gets straight to one of these essential conundrums, and everything Baba says and directs us to do is in some sense an absolute conundrum. I mean, it's like, is it this or is it that, or is it somehow both, or it just, you know, the mind just doesn't want to grab hold of it, but somehow or other I feel, and Jeff kind of got at this, that that one of the tricks in the toolbox is to somehow make the necessary effort while all the time giving or entrusting that effort to Baba, to prevent the ego mind from grabbing a hold of it, taking that effort for its own, and feeling either superior, you know, or inferior, or puffed up in any way. And, you know, because it's what the mind wants to do. You know, it wants to take credit for everything, and even the giving up to Baba. So somehow I think, for me anyway, it feels like that's the key, is to make whatever effort one feels necessary, but at the very same time entrusting that effort, and in fact giving that effort to Baba.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, I just wanted to respond to Adrienne, that to remember that Baba says all you have to do is love him. There's no test. You don't have to do something to prove you're worthy of God's love. It's really about, you know, feeling inside yourself that you're accepting where you're at. Baba comes and meets us wherever we're at, whatever level we're at. Baba comes to everyone at every level. And he always says, all I want is your love. Love me. Of course, it's great if we could do more and selfless service and do all these great things. And eventually, hopefully, we all do. But I think it's so important to remember we are where we're at, and we're just human. And Baba loves us anyways, which is great. Just, you know, despite all our mistakes, despite all our lives, despite all our scars and impressions, he loves us as we are, and he just wants our love.
Very true.
So true.
It's, yeah, he really absolutely accepts us and is guiding us, I think, each step of the way, even though we don't always aware of that. But I think, like Kate says, he loves us so much every moment. And I guess some of that effort is to remember that he does love us so much.
Which is his grace.
Every
Effort
moment.
and grace.
Yeah, and maybe that effort helps receive his grace that's really always there with us.
Just love him.
Very good. No, it's
Okay. It seems that different like tools, methods come up I hear something and it just clicks, and for a while that works. It feels like it's working to get closer to Baba through whatever it is. One of the things, I believe it's in this book, that he says is to just be natural. And it's like, somehow that just like clicked for me. Instead of trying all the time or, you know, whatever, to just be natural, just be honest and natural and let him take over. That works for a while, and then something else seems to come above that or within that. So it's just, I think it's so paradoxical. And, you know, he talks about having infinite patience and infinite longing. And it's just such a game. And sometimes it feels better to just completely give up and give it over and accept how it is in the moment, and relish the moments when I can be totally in the present and watch him do it instead of me or whatever. And then get completely lost and forget, you know, and all that. So it's such a game and such a dance. And I think somehow we're all, it seems to me, I've talked for myself that I am moving closer to Baba, but half the time I have nothing to do with that. That's his deal, not mine. So that's all. Thanks.
Yeah. I think a lot of us have a whole repertoire of things that we do in the course of the day or in the course of a month that keep that intimacy alive. And something that worked yesterday may not be working today, I find. So I've got a whole lot of different things I'm juggling around to feel that companionship of Baba. It isn't just the same thing all the time. Sometimes it's plunging in and losing myself in things. Sometimes it's, you know, saying Baba's name inwardly. Sometimes it's music, doing something creative. I resort to all sorts of things, and I think you're kind of saying that it's not the same thing every day that will necessarily work. Does that make sense, Robin?
Yeah. Paul Fusco, go ahead.
So first of all, Danny, I love you, my brother. You touched me, man. You touched me. And Damien, I know you. I don't know. Is that Kate? Is that your name?
Kate with Damien?
Yeah, I don't know you, but I love you. All right. So basically, right, listening to Danny and Kate, at the end of the day, Baba has come to us, right? He comes to you. And when someone gives you a gift, what effort is there in that? There is no effort when someone gives you a gift. That's the loving, it's the giving, right? But the effort, in my opinion, is the appreciation of the gift. The appreciation of how to love Baba, to what Robin was saying, right? And how to love Baba, and how that's the effort, and how to remember. And then the grace just keeps coming because it was already given, right? So for, you know, the song comes to my mind, at least for me. Bad boy, what you gonna do? What you gonna do now that he's come for you?
Mm-hmm.
Love.
Yep.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, yeah.
That's funny. Daniel Stone, go ahead.
So, Jeff, you started out by raising the question about what was meant by the second to the last phrase here, where Baba says, in this section, Baba says that what we have to do is reverse the process of creation perception without obliterating consciousness. And somebody else also raised that question. And you also asked what the experience would be of that. So I was thinking about that because when I listened to it the first time, I was wondering about that too. And I went back and referred back to the start of this whole section, which is where he's really talking about what Baba said, is that basically we're creating our own veils as we go. That's the process of creation that he's talking about, I think, there. And that then becomes the basis of our perception. And so what I think he's talking about is that we need to stop doing that. We need to stop creating those veils. but without obliterating consciousness, that makes me, I think about my own experiences in remembrance with Baba, and how, it's very easy in trying to go into remembrance to fall asleep, which is the which is what it means to obliterate consciousness. There's no consciousness when we do that, and it's one of the watchwords about meditation is to not fall asleep, and it's something you guard against. And I think what I take it that he's talking about is to say we need to find a way to just be in pure awareness of Baba and his presence, and stay awake during that presence. That's what I think he's talking about there. Just my take on it.
No, very good. That, in other words, the creation that we're involved in is creating veils.
That's right. Yeah, it's all the veil creating machine.
And to stop that process is really reversing the creative process, that creation. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
They're very simple.
Stuart Big.
On the same question, I like what Daniel said. And I also think the sentence maybe hints at the dichotomy of evolution and involution. The evolution, we're building up, developing, and then the involution is the stopping of that building up, and it's the clearing away and the polishing so that the infinite light of God becomes brighter and brighter as more is cleared away. That I have a suspicion about that.
Yeah. Yeah, simultaneously as we're kind of pulling out, Darwin talks about withdrawing the tentacles of consciousness from being enmeshed in the world and withdrawing those so that we're not so identified with things, and even psychological things or personal attainments, withdrawing more and more, which is really reversing the creation. and eventually, as we withdraw the tentacles of consciousness, we come to a place within where the light then begins to shine on us. Because as long as our consciousness is enmeshed in creation, it's darkened, you might say. And as we pull out, we get a little bit incrementally more light, more clarity, more simplicity. So that's kind of what you said, kind of reminds me of that.
Marvin, you had your hand up.
Well, yes, I was going to comment on the same paragraph there, basically agreeing with Daniel and Stuart. I was just going to put it that the reversing the process of creation basically as stopping the accumulation of binding sanskaras and starting the process of unwinding the sanskaras, of letting them fall away, which is the involution process, as Stuart said. That's it.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah.
And Catherine Cox.
Yeah, what I see as the reversing the process of creation and perception without obliterating consciousness. There's quite a bit to be said about that, what's in quotes, but reversing the process of creation to me is redirecting it towards the very beginning of the creation, which is love must love. That God, there's, I can't remember who said it, I thought it was Margaret Crass, there's not a hair's breadth of difference between God and love. And that creation, that moment of creating creation is where we're actually going to redirect towards. And that again brings in when all that matters is really loving. And Baba will always love us because love is love and it must love. But that's the process of going towards that, the very beginning. Okay.
Beautiful.
Heidi, you have your hand up.
So my computer is buffering, so I apologize because I missed some things. But I wanted to mention one of my struggles is to try to find a practical way to understand the writing and to apply it. And for me, the reversing of the process of creation, my own limitations.
Whoop, we're missing you there.
Things that I want to enter the silence. I don't know how else to call it, but to allow Baba to be in Baba's silence with Baba, because then everything becomes clear. You can almost sense your own consciousness versus the infinite consciousness. And you could see the possibility of reversing this crazy creation that we do. And the other is, for me, is repeating Baba's name. And it sort of opens up the doorway to his consciousness and more awareness of who we really are and who Baba really is. So thank you.
And I guess you know, Baba said that he was, from the beginning of his mission, he was saying his own name inwardly.
Yes.
So his name is invested with great substance and power and richness and love. Very dissolving.
Yeah. Interesting with the idea of effort, because I'm trying to connect Darwin's idea of effort and feel it with some of Baba's writings, and especially Bob is saying that I'm paraphrasing now, but he said something about service, and then no amount of meditation or penance or prayer could take the place of service in his name. So I think there is a connection somehow between effort and service, and even willingness, I guess, just even willingness to put forth some effort, even if you don't want to or don't understand what effort you're going to exercise. Just the willingness sometimes, Baba just, provides a floodgate of love and awareness and grace that's ever flowing. I guess, the willingness that we're willing to receive Baba's grace, which is ever flowing. That may sound simple, but I don't think it is a lot of the time, because we do create these limitations of who we are and worthiness and so forth. And we talked about that the last week also in a psychological sense, but just even being willing, I think sometimes is enough.
Yeah. It attracts the grace for sure.
That line that is in question has to do with the creation part that he started out the paragraph with. It's very difficult to come out of that entanglement. It means that we make veils by taking as real those conditions that we have created in the first place. Speaking about the hills and the valleys and the trees that he saw with the mandali when they came out of the hall as creations that we make. Therefore, by reversing those, you go back into the internal Baba, your true self. And it's a trick to do that, as he found out, without losing consciousness. Since he lost consciousness for several years. So I think that you stop creating, and then you focus your perceptions inside.
Yeah. That's the movement. Now, she was asking if you would read the next subchapter, which is Misconceptions.
Certainly. Perhaps most of our lives as spiritual seekers is spent consciously or unconsciously trying to correct the latent misconceptions that have been plaguing us from the subconscious level of our minds. When we probe each of our own particular misconceptions to its foundation, we discover that we have been coping with wrong answers for most of our lives. we have accepted as facts things that are simply not true. We have been brought up with the fundamental misconceptions that the creation is real and that we are individual limited creatures. And so right from the beginning, we take it all for granted. There are many misconceptions that we take to be part of our ordinary lives, not realizing they are misconceptions and that they are distorting our inner awareness. As seekers of truth, we have to see through the misconceptions and what they cause and replace all that with what is the nearest we can come to the truth itself. We cannot add truth to the misconceptions. As seekers of truth, we have to see through the misconceptions and what they cause and replace all that with what is the nearest we can come to the truth itself. We cannot add truth to the misconceptions. Misconceptions can include the tendency to imagine things and to follow trains of thought. Sometimes before we even get out of bed, a certain train of thought has already left the station, and we are not even aware that this has happened. When we first wake up in the morning, the mind gets activated, and we present it with a train of thought, which leads us to other trains of thought, and they produce what becomes the content of our day. So we get involved in following these trains of thought instead of taking control and initiating a wisely chosen train of thought. Misconceptions also can involve low self-esteem based on an incorrect assessment of who and what we really are. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, is a very profound and philosophically revealing statement. Our everyday thinking, our beliefs, and the limitations that we accept are all part of the bondage that we experience. We start with a conclusion from our subconscious and our observations, then look for signs confirming our conclusion, which in turn solidify that conclusion. That to me is very similar to the idea that Baba was talking about when he walked outside the door and said, look at the hills and all this stuff that you're creating yourself automatically and assuming are real to begin with, which in turn designs or defines your whole day and your interaction with the reality you've created.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this line here. We make a mistake. Oh, wait. Sorry. We we accept as facts things that are simply not true. I mean, we accept like everybody's separate, you know, something like that. And I mean, boy, how that changes our entire life. If you buy into that and everybody's separate, that's an angle of vision that changes everything. I mean, you know, I remember one time, Darwin used, in the latter years when he was in his mid-90s, he used to go, some of us would be up there at his house, and he would go into these deep states of absorption from time to time. And when he did, absorption in Baba, and we would all kind of quiet down and let him be in that space. But on one occasion, I was sitting with him in the kitchen, and he went into one of those states. And I was made so bold as to say, Darwin, what are you doing in there? And he said, I am trying to dissolve all standpoints. I'm trying to dissolve all standpoints. It's those standpoints that keep us from the oneness, you know, the oneness of life. And here he is teetering at the end of his days, trying to dissolve that thing that makes him on one side and everything else on the other. You know, but that's an example of these misconceptions that we buy into and take as an established, indisputable fact. Yeah. But anyone have anything to say about this last discourse or subchapter?
Yeah, there's some hands up. Damien, go ahead.
Okay. Just there are a couple points that struck me that Darwin was often would say, you know, when we wake up in the morning, you know, you're right in that in between wake up and still sleeping, because he said there's always a train of thought that we tend to get on as soon as we wake up. So what he suggested is that we would right before we jump on that train, to think of Baba right as we're waking up in the morning. And then that kind of sets the tone for the whole day, rather than jumping on that train of thought, which our mind is always producing. And not that I do it very often, but it really helps, you know, just that first moment you're waking up to think of Baba then. And it tends to color the whole day before we jump on the trains of thought. And the other thing that he said, it's in the end of this, you know, misconceptions also can involve low self-esteem based on an incorrect assessment of who and what we really are. And that, of course, relates to that section on limitations. And one thing that struck me with Darwin would say this many times, that a normal, healthy self-esteem is a very important spiritual quality to have. And it just, rather than that sense we all think we're not good enough, basically, most of us go through life with some of that somewhere in there. And so his thing was, rather than limit ourselves, just have a normal, healthy self-esteem. And part of that, of course, is knowing that Baba loves us as we walk through this world.
Yep. Very good, Damien.
Thanks.
Any other?
Yeah. Heidi, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to mention in the last paragraph where Darwin so eloquently refers to the quote, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so he is." I just know this is from a book by James Allen, an old version of which I have here, and it's a really good book to take a look at, because I know Darwin was, I didn't know him personally, but feel it to be so, that he was
he read that.
Well, he read all the Christian
thoroughly.
metaphysicians. There was like a floodgate of Christian metaphysical and mystical writers between 1890 and 1928, I believe it was, a floodgate. I mentioned one last week, Ralph Waldo Trine, In Tune with the Infinite. But Darwin, he gently weaves this in. And this is a book, if you get a chance to read it, by James Allen, because what I found amazing to me was that without knowing it, I was drawn to the Christian metaphysicians because they had practical ways to and beautiful ways to talk about the fact of who we really are, just as a fact, without having to struggle with probably all the dysfunction we grew up with and all our self-esteem issues. And you read something like this and you think, oh, it's just a fact. And then you read Baba and it makes your whole being know, you know, not just your mind or your heart, but your whole self. So check it out. And, you know, I just noticed in the next chapter 5, it's a really good book. And his wife, actually, Lily Allen doesn't get a lot of attention, but Lily Allen wrote a lot of mystical, metaphysical books. And one of her little books, it's a tiny, thin book, and it's called, get this, it's called How to Enter the Silence.
Yeah.
And it's basically for women who were not honored at the time for their contributions to metaphysical thinking. And so she wrote this book, and it's such a beautiful feeling book about how to quiet yourself and just gently place yourself in Baba's silence. So Lily Allen is also a good one to take a look at. I'm sorry, Jeff, you were asking something.
Yeah, no, good. No, I know that Darwin read a lot of those. That before Baba came, that was the literature that they read, because it was the only thing that echoed what they were experiencing.
Hi, guys. Yeah, you know, to piggyback on what Damien said, the wisecrack that came through my head was, well, Baba's not, you know, not only is he there, but he gets on the train with us. So we're still riding the train. We still may be attacked, but he's with us. He's hanging out right there next to us the whole time. So even if we're on the train, he's a companion. And again, that's a way, that's that presence of being in the presence of Baba. And then it reminded me of, you know, Darwin would talk about how you would set the alarm when you first wake up in the morning, and then at 12 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock, and then when you just go to bed, you know, think of Baba during those times. And he spent so much time looking at his watch to make sure he was on time to do that. He was actually spending a lot of time thinking about Baba, you know.
Yeah.
But this gets all into the whole conversation. He's talking about how it just lightens the load. You're not quite as attached to it because you've got this companion with you all the time, you know. And that gets into the whole provisional ego thing, where it ends up, it's not just a companion, it's actually him doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, very good.
Just like to comment on what Damien said and what Jim said in terms of getting up in the morning. And we'll see it later on in Effort and Grace, but Darwin always emphasizes this idea of Sahaj Dhyan that Baba had taught, and that's dressing your soul with Baba. You do that when you first get up, do that at noon, you do that at 5 o'clock, and do that just before you go to bed. But I think that to me, that's one of the ways I try to remember Baba. You know, I definitely, Darwin's going to talk about this later on in Effort and Grace.
Yeah. Yeah, and Baba said, if you do that, you remember him those 4 moments, you'll have his companionship throughout the day. Yeah. Do you have something just in general, something that comes to them, or not necessarily relevant to this last subchapter?
Mary Ellen has her hand up.
Oh dear, you caught me as I was trying to lower it again. I was deeply moved this afternoon, and it reflects on what several people have talked about tonight. If anyone watched the Andrea Bocelli concert this afternoon live, there were 2,800,000 people watching him singing Catholic sacred music. Well, most of them were Catholic sacred songs, except for one, Amazing Grace, while they were also showing street scenes of New York, Paris, and London, all of the streets being essentially empty. And it struck me in a very interesting way, because I too have thought of this pandemic as being Baba's. And that thought that there are 2,800,000 people simultaneously quietly watching someone singing in a language they probably don't understand sacred music and just being drawn inward. And it just felt very powerful in that moment to think of that many people around the world at whatever point they're at, listening and sharing in that experience together.
Yeah. Oh, I meant to I meant to listen to that and I forgot. But that's beautiful.
But I want to comment on just what was just said, because about the pandemic and all that. When I came back one time from India, I had a kind of a culture shock moment. And I was in my hometown, which is not a very big town, that's Elmira, New York. And I was around my neighborhood and I was looking down, up and down Davis Street, which would be as far, you wouldn't see an end to it. Another street, you could see maybe 4 blocks past. But as I looked down, India is very crowded. And all of a sudden, because I had been living there and now I was back here, it felt alarmingly horrible, like something like it had to have been a nuclear war and destroyed everybody. It looked like I only saw 2 people down by St. Casimir's Church, 3 blocks away. And as far as the eye could see, there was maybe another 2 cars. But see, that's normal. That's normal for America and a smaller town. In India, it would be bustling, even if it's Erangown Village. And I had that sense of like some war had happened and where were all the people? And what came to me was this phrase, safe and sound in your home. And that it's an odd story, but it's in some way appropriate for what's happening right now. But why I kept raising my hand was when Jeff was talking about standpoints that Darwin would kind of go, God knows what he was doing inside that advanced soul. But one of the falsehoods that we've always had is a great one is, I think, therefore I am. That's a starting point and it's completely false.
Yeah.
Shelley. And one of the comments he made is that the concert was not a concert, but a prayer. And also when they showed the video of the places that have been so badly affected by the coronavirus, they also showed the 2 towns which were most affected in Italy. And like, is it Marilyn Cox who just spoke? As she was talking about how the streets in her small town had no people in them. That was the other thing that was noticeable. All the streets and all of the towns, whether in Paris or New York or Milan or these 2 villages, were all deserted. It was really amazing to think about. And then the other thing is relating to the different standpoints. I've been listening to Listen Humanity, Mayor Baba, and I just found out it's on mayhermedia.com. And in the chapter on war and its effects and its causes, it talks about our misconceptions about points of views and how we misunderstand war and the purpose of it. And I just thought it was very good for just the lack of our understanding of perspectives. And essentially he was just saying there's only one thing, no matter what we think, it's only one. Anyway, I highly recommend that chapter for more insights on this perspective.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So let's have a few moments of silence, unless anybody has some final thing to say. And we have people all over the world that, as you know, many who are suffering greatly. Okay. Well, that moment of silence had the feeling of the moments of silence we had with Darwin up in Schenectady. There was a certain kind of buzz. So maybe Darwin has shown up too. I asked Bob to send Darwin to join us.
You called in reinforcements?
Yes. So.
I am here, love, I am here. Like the air you breathe, I'm always here. Keep me near, love, in your heart so dear. Have no fear, love, while I am here. Keep me near, my love, keep me near. I am here, my love, I am here. Ooh. Do you see me shining in the moon above? Do you hear the river sing of my everlasting love? I'm everywhere, love, and I am here. I'm in your prayers, love, and I'm in your tears. Keep me near, my love, keep me near. I am here, my love, I am here. I'm the friend that will not let you down. And even when you are not looking, I am around. And in your darkest moments, there is nothing you could do that could make me stop loving you. Keep me near, my love, near to you. I am here, my love. I'm always here with you.
All right. Thank you, Jay Baba. Lovely. Ah, wow. So this song starts out in the lagoon cabin, and then it makes its way to various places around the center. And it's waiting for all of you to return. Can you hear all right?
Wait. That's gonna be too much far out, sorry.
Can you hear the guitar? Okay, good. You can.
Can you hear the out of tone
Yeah.
strings? Okay.
Some sweet fragrance fills your cabin, welcomes me as I come in. When I'm quiet, I hear the fullness in the room where you have been. Like the scent of secret flowers, there's a beauty I receive. I can sit with you for hours, closer than the air I breathe.
I can see where you were walking, photographs I know so well, mark the scenes of favorite stories that my heart still longs to tell. In the pictures you are smiling on the path beside the pond. As I follow in your footsteps, touched by something far beyond.
I reach out to hold the railing, rest my hand and start to grin. Now I stand where you were standing, touching where your hands have been. On this bridge you meet me closer, crossing over time and space. These are tears of grateful wonder, flowing down my smiling face. Now I find I'm often smiling, just to turn and feel you here. I can sense your sacred timing, everywhere I go, you're near. I can trace your human history, touch the cushion on your chair. You left so much grace and mystery, I can feel you everywhere. You left so much grace and mystery, I can feel you everywhere.